to welcome everyone to my new TV show, and what better way to start a new show than with old friends? Right. Now, the last time we were all together was at Harold's birthday party. You can't do better than a rock and roll birthday in New York City. And Marge and Alan both got to perform that evening, as did Harold's friend, the infamous David Peel. Now, those of you who are not familiar with David's work, 90% of the songs he writes are about smoking marijuana, and the other 10% are about not having any more marijuana. Now, David was a favorite of John Lennon's, is this correct? Who actually produced his album, didn't he?
John took us from Elektra. He was such a big fan that signed us to Apple and produced Above Smoke Stove, which was the only Apple album ever banned 48 hours after it came out. Now you can buy it on eBay for $2,000.
It usually takes Apple albums 3 days, is what you're saying.
No, it's the only Apple album ever banned.
Very good. Well, now you once told me a great story about you and David on Bob Dylan's birthday that involved the now infamous celebrity. I would like you to share that with the audience.
Back in the day, in a little village called Greenwood, Bob Dylan, yes, it was positively 4th Street, but before it became the 1%, Dylan was already the 1% and moved into one of the highest priced townhouses. It's on the Bleecker McDougal, correct?
Just a stone's throw away.
That's a stone's throw away. And we decided we were going to do the Bob Dylan birthday bashing. So we pulled up in front, climbed on top of the cars in front of Dylan's house, and started singing Bob Dylan, Rugged Zimmerman, Fuck You. And you can see the windows closing and the neighbors looking out, and about 600 people in the street, all singing along with us. And if you took a look on either side, you could see the bubblegum machines on the 2 police cars, which couldn't get down the street, and they're laughing. And we're going on in that Brooklyn voice, hey, Bob Dylan, Robert Zimmerman, fuck you, represent Alabama. And going on, and I'm standing on top of the car in my leather pants, trying to look old Jim Morrison, crossing the tambourine up, and I'm like, oh, Mr. Black. And all of a sudden, who comes walking out but Mr. Puddin' Pop himself? Who lives next door but Bill Cosby? Now, we've known him, all of us in the village, since '67. And I guess he was taking Dylan's Lay Lady Lay a little too literally. That's as polite as it's going to get. And I'm standing up there and I'm looking, and there's Bill Cosby, and I decided, well, that's great. Hey, everybody, it's Bill Cosby. Fuck Bill Cosby. Hey, fuck Bill Cosby. And he's like, you oughtn't be doing that. That's not nice. And I'm standing up there just as if I had abs. He goes, hey, Bill Cosby, fuck you, we know you're a funny motherfucker. And he's like, you oughtn't be doing that. And he goes walking down the street, and I'm wearing, Bill Cosby, fuck you. Hey, you're not going to stay away from the teeny boppers. They're mine. And in those days, the teeny boppers brought their own drugs. You didn't have to give it to them.
I like kids who come prepared.
Yes.
Girl Scouts, I
guess. Yeah, they came with cookies.
I thought they lost their cookies years before.
Well, let's just say that they weren't mini skirts, they were wide belts. So Bill Cosby's running down the street, and we're all, fuck you, fuck you. And this thing, and then we go into our big hit from the first album, Have Marijuana, singing Up Against the Wall, Motherfucker. Bill Cosby and Bob Dylan, and you can see Dylan behind the curtain looking out, fucking David. And down the street, and all of a sudden I turn around, and everybody is running towards the corner of Bleecker and McDougal. And I'm like, what the hell is this? So I'm seeing even David ran, got the guitar in his back and ran down the street. So as I'm trying to look all macho, climbing down off the car without falling, and I see all of a sudden out of the crowd, David comes with a hot dog, and he's eating a hot dog. What had happened was, is that Bill Cosby went down to the corner and told the hot dog stand guy how much for all the hot dogs. give them all away free. So all of a sudden, all the crowd ran for free hot dogs, and yeah, fuck Bill Cosby, fuck you, free hot dogs.
So it's true that an army travels on his stomach. I don't know.
Yeah, but it was kind of strange because the hot dogs and pudding pops and just all symbology.
A
of all of
well-balanced
it.
meal.
Well,
All right, we are now going to move on to Alan,
Alan.
who has had
Yeah, well,
an
let's
amazing
talk,
career.
I want to talk about David Peel for a second.
do?
If you compare the melody of Having Marijuana and John Lennon's Power to the People, they're identical. And John Lennon said, if I'd been born in New York, I would have been David Peel.
So Lennon
That's
ripped
a
off
high-
David
Yeah.
Peel.
Not ripped off, I said, you know, they were a mutual, symbiotic, had a mutual symbiotic
If I
relationship.
may, John said that recording the Pope Stump Stoke was the most fun he ever had recording.
Interesting.
And that was us?
Yeah.
Ah, that's cool.
Too bad he's not around now and hook up with Kanye.
No.
That Lennon kid would have had a career yet. Okay, well, we've got important stuff to talk to Alan about, because those of you who are not aware, Alan wrote a little-known tune called I Love Rock and Roll, fairly successful. Which is now celebrating its 40th birthday, so that
It's the 40th year since I released it, this May 17th. Thank you. 1975 in England.
that 17-year-old by the record machine, he's 57 now.
Exactly.
And now we put your credit card in the jukebox.
Yeah.
You're not getting much for a dime, are
It would
you?
have been put a credit card in the jukebox, baby.
Absolutely.
He doesn't, yeah.
Now, we were going to talk about I Love Rock and Roll and the band The Arrows you were with when you wrote that
Right.
song, but first we're going way back.
Okay.
Because we want to hear how a white kid from New York became a rock star in Japan.
Well, okay. My band in the Village broke up in 1968. My bass player, who was integral to the harmony of the band, went off to Boston College. So that was the end of that band. And I got an offer to audition for the Left Bank, who were famous for Walk Away Renee, Pretty Ballerina. I auditioned with 50 people, and in the end it was down to 2 people, me and Bob Kulick. And I got it because I could sing, Bob couldn't. So I got into the band, the Left Bank, and we rehearsed for about a month. And then managerial decision was for them to go out as a vocal 3-piece. And I was very disappointed, needless to say. So my mother at the same time was saying, why don't you come over and live with me in Japan? She was on her second marriage. She had relocated to Japan as the wife of a UPI vice president. And his name was Don Bryden, he's passed away. Anyway, I ended up in Japan in the summer of '68 because I was fed up with the Left Bank, basically. I wanted to get as far away from New York as I possibly could. And I found out there was a rock scene in Japan, and I dove in. And I started out playing with a group called the Dynamites over there. Then it escalated to me getting involved with a group called The Lead, who are on RCA Records, and a bunch of army brats living in Japan, Americans. And they got deported, so I was a solo act. And as a result of them being deported and me going solo, I became the first signee to Atlantic Records Japan in 1970, when they started the label there. I sang all in Japanese back then, and I was a kid from New York, yeah.
Your Japanese still good, Alan.
Senzen Hekio.
Yeah, take that, man. Yeah.
What did it say?
I can get around it, so it's fine.
Oh, okay. So you can translate Beach Boys songs into Japanese?
I would rather not.
So, okay, so you're still in Japan.
Yeah. And so, basically I went through a lot of different labels in Japan. I went from Atlantic, and I wanted to make an album with Atlantic in English, and they refused. And I would have had Paul Kossoff, Simon Kirke, and Tetsu Yamauchi on that album. They said, you're a teen star, you can't do this. And I said, well, I don't want to be with you anymore then. By that time, Tetsu had gone to England to join Free. He was my bass player in Japan. People who don't know Free, they did All Right Now, Wish Him Well, a bunch of songs like that. He was the first Japanese guy to leave Japan and become famous.
Did he end up in the Faces or something?
He ended up in the Faces, correct. So he was the only Japanese guy to hit that level of the rock hierarchy since, throughout. But he was my bass player before all that. And so anyway, we never did an album together at that time because he had gone over to join Free. So I started to do my own album, playing all the instruments with a guy named Eugene Harada on drums for Columbia Records Japan, in English, because Atlantic wouldn't record me in English. So I was happy with that. It was kind of a Beatlesque Badfinger sort of album. And I got a cover with Tiny Tim off that album. And I didn't know how he got it, because it was only released in Japan in '71.
How did Tiny do your songs?
He did it the same way he does all his songs.
Was the ukulele work up to par?
Yeah. I mean, it was at the peak of his popularity. It was out in 1972 on Scepter Records, and I'm very happy. It was my first big cover, as a songwriter.
Who cares who sings it?
What about other people who've done your songs since then?
I've had Lou Rawls, Joan Jett, Britney Spears, Chuck Jackson, Felix Cavallari.
Everyone has had Britney
Miley
Spears.
Cyrus.
Well, okay, we're going to get into how you eventually left by the column, but first
Right.
we cannot ignore Marge because
Marge!
Brooklynites have to stay together.
Go
Marge has sung background vocals with Aerosmith, with ELO, not oddly enough on the David Peel album. How'd you miss that?
No, I
Okay.
I probably was on the road.
The thing I was most fascinated
She
about.
really had too much class for us.
Really.
Yeah,
Well,
she was from Brooklyn, but sang too well. If you sang well, you were out of the band.
The thing I'm most fascinated about with Marge, speaking of singing well, she sung background vocals for Luciano Pavarotti. Now, for a rock and roller, how did this happen?
Okay, almost coming off like what the glam rock era of the 80s. I was in a glam rock band, big old heavy metal, Proton, real Godzilla music. And my drummer died from AIDS. So I said, I'm gonna pack in the rock and roll, because my roots really are in classical music. And I'm going to audition for the Collegiate Chorale, which bases out of Carnegie Hall. So my audacity, I go and I audition. Maestro loves me, and then he hands me Mozart's score, and he says, "Go ahead, read." And I go, "Oh." And I handed it back to him, and he was like, "What? With that voice, you can't read?" I said, "No, I don't know how to read music." And so he wrote me a letter, and he said, "Please come back a year later, study, on an elementary level. They'll push me in as long as I can, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do." I'm sitting there with people with master's and doctorate degrees in music. So I come back into the chorus a year later. They let me in because I could, basically partially read the score. And all of a sudden, Luciano Pavarotti he's doing his Pavarotti Plus shows on Channel 13, which is public TV, which of course goes across the whole country, and I guess across the whole world. Pavarotti Plus, and then the Richard Tucker Galas, that all based out of, Lincoln Center. He needed a chorus for his grand opera arias that he would do many of, so he called on the Collegiate Chorale. So I got to sing with him about 5 times, 5 different shows at the Metropolitan Opera and at Lincoln Center, Avery Fisher Hall, and him doing, just beautiful aria, and of course his, Nessun Dorma. The audience, I think that was like I never felt it was almost like a wind that came from the audience, because they gave this man 20-minute curtain calls. They would not let him sit down. I mean, he would come back. The cameras were already down, and he was just coming back, one song after the other. And we all felt it. When this man sang in front of you, and he was just tremendous, and the energy from the audience when it came back at him, it was almost like it pinned us all up on it was just, I said, I've sung in some of the biggest festivals, biggest arenas, with the biggest bands, and I've never felt an audience, the energy come from an audience for the love that they had for that man, and just the amount of just exuded from the audience. it made your hair stand on end, and it was amazing. So for me, that was like a pinnacle of my career, to be able to sing with that man. Here, I'm not a trained musician, but I have a very big voice, and the maestro put me in the first tenor section. So I dressed with a man's tuxedo. It's a trouser roll, they call it in opera. So I was dressed like a man in a tuxedo with a bow tie, and I sang all the first tenor parts because I could belt. And then wanted to go backstage and see Luciano Pavarotti, and he says, "You're wearing a suit?" You know, because only in America do they allow women to be first tenors. So in Europe they don't recognize it. So if we had a European maestro, I had to wear a skirt and stand on the perimeter of the soprano section, which was really difficult. So Luciano Pavarotti goes, "You're wearing a tuxedo?" He says, "You're a first tenor?" And I said, "Yes." And he was like, he just amazing, talking shop with me about first tenor, you know, in the range, and I can't believe it, you're a female first tenor. And the man, I have so many pictures with him, just sitting and just talking with him. He was such a personable and very approachable, you know, man, and he loved what he did, and he was just very impressed that I sang first tenor, like he did.
In a little while, we're going to come back and hear about how you talk shop with Robert Plant.
Yes.
It's a different experience.
From one extreme to the other.
Yeah. But first, we want to know, Harold, have you performed with any operas, stars? And we're not talking sex, you know.
Only sex.
Oh, okay. So, how are they? Because there's a lot of killing in that music, isn't there?
Oh yeah, Macbeth and
Yeah, but you come back for an encore.
That's the most violent music there is. That's
some
like
of it,
way
yeah.
beyond punk.
Don Giovanni. Don Giovanni.
Now, Harold, we're going to get into your next story. We may get caught with a break and tease people. Have you teased people before?
I have been teased.
You
Oh,
have?
you mean no? Oh, no,
Right.
no.
Well,
No.
Harold, as his band Teenage Lust, which was also a favorite of John Lennon's. I'm surprised his Lennon guy didn't get further in the business. But
Actually, we got as far as a demo for Apple, but Yoko. And please don't get me started on Yoko. Please do.
did you ever get started on your
Hands around throat. But just at the
that erotic fixation
The
thing?
first- other than all the other problems, with just one little hint. Her book Grapefruit comes out. Now, Yoko's already pissed at me, and the Lusteads, we'll get into that later. But I get a call from a fan that says, "Hey, Yoko's still pissed at you, look at her book Grapefruit." And I go out and I actually bought the book, and I'm looking through it. And it's on the 8th day of the dance festival, Yoko's drawings, and then I saw what they were talking about. And it says, "See the clouds, name the clouds." And there, with a big arrow to the cloud, the name of the cloud is Harold. I'm honored. I mean, have her pissed. How much do you want me to tell about the LL and
If there's
John
sex
and-
involved, Harold, go into detail.
Okay.
This is that kind of show.
We were going to be John's backup band. If you remember, we had gone to Geraldo Rivera after the Willowbrook expose. And John was trying to get a green card to go to Channel 7, and it was Geraldo Rivera and Roger Grimsby, before your time. Okay. And John says, "Well, look, we'll hold a concert and raise money for 1-to-1. And in actuality, 1-to-1 was John's concept, but when I said, "John, Geraldo was ripping you off," he says, "I don't care. I just want to stay in the country." So first we rehearsed at the Fillmore, and it turned out to be Elvin's Memory, the backup band, and John had to make Teenage Lust and the Lustettes the chorus. It was us, Stevie Wonder, Billy Preston, I saw Phil
This is like We Are the
Spector.
World.
It was actually one of the first. The
Right,
saxophone player.
I don't want to disrupt your
Just
sex,
put the
but
saxophone player for Sha Na got to Phil Spector before me, picked them up, and threw them right across the floor. After that, I just like, "Oh, you got one good anyway." Let me just say about Phil Spector. After working with him, he never let his talent get in the way of being an asshole. Gray hair, all 37 of them.
okay, we are going to come back to that story but we are going to take a brief break, and then we will return with more sex, drugs, and Harold Black.
Yeah!